When I was admitted to the hospital, my boyfriend was celebrating freedom with his ex, so I packed up and threw out his things. Hey everyone, before I jump into this story, I've got a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying these kinds of stories, please hit that subscribe button, give this a like, and turn on notifications. It really helps out the channel, especially since not many people stick around until the end. Every click counts, and lets me keep bringing you more of these real-life messes. Thanks a ton. Hello, Reddit. So, 5 years ago, I met Travis at the city's eco center while volunteering on a weekend I almost bailed on. I remember I was tired, it was cold, and honestly, I just wanted to stay in bed. But I dragged myself there because a friend had signed us both up and kept nagging me about it. That's where I first saw Travis, standing in front of a group of kids, holding up a compost bin like it was a sacred relic, and going off on this wildly passionate monologue about decomposition as a metaphor for rebirth. He literally called himself the king of compost. No joke. He said it with this completely straight face, like it was the highest honor anyone could hold. I remember thinking, okay, this guy is either completely out of his mind or a hidden genius. Maybe both. Travis had this wild energy to him. He talked fast, gestured like he was conducting an orchestra, and kept using big words like interconnectivity and microbial revolution. It was ridiculous, but also kind of magnetic. I was standing in the back, holding a bag of coffee grounds we were supposed to be mixing into the pile, and by the end of his speech, I found myself smiling like an idiot. I hadn't even realized I'd stepped closer. Later that day, we got paired up to sort bins, and he immediately launched into this philosophical tangent about how composting is just a reminder that everything can be transformed if you give it time and the right ingredients. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "That's true for people too." I remember thinking, holy hell, this man is a walking TED Talk. His shirt had a stain on it, banana peel, I think, and one pant leg was tucked into his sock for some reason. But he was talking like we were in some kind of sacred temple, not next to a bin of rotting kale. And somehow, that weird sincerity worked. I wasn't even trying to flirt with anyone that day. I just wanted to do my hours and go home. But there he was, completely ruining my plans by being weirdly charismatic and deeply passionate about trash. We got coffee after the shift. I remember I didn't even like the place we went to. It was one of those too trendy cafes where everything's made out of recycled skateboards and the chairs wobble. But we sat there for 3 hours. He told me he'd studied environmental design, but dropped out because he didn't want to be part of a system that prioritized appearance over substance. I didn't totally get what he meant, but the way he said it, it sounded noble. Or at least, it did back then. Travis was one of those people who always had a new project. Always. A new diet, a new side hustle, a new philosophy, a new obsession. One month, he was trying to make his own shampoo from orange peels. The next, he was convinced we should raise silkworms in our apartment for ethical fabric purposes. It sounds annoying, but it didn't start that way. At first, it was kind of endearing. His excitement made you want to believe in things. It made you feel like maybe you were just missing out on a more creative way of living. I used to joke that dating Travis was like being in a relationship with an app still in beta. Cool idea, but constantly crashing. You never knew what version you were waking up to. But back then, in those early days, I didn't care. He made me feel like I was part of something bigger, like we were creating our own little world. He wrote me letters on scrap paper, brought home stray plants from the sidewalk, and once turned an old mini fridge into a vertical garden just because he thought it'd be a cool experiment in space reclamation. Half the time, our place smelled like soil and vinegar, but I was weirdly okay with it. The truth is, I wasn't naive. I knew he was a fixer-upper from the beginning, the kind of guy who comes with more potential than actual plans. But part of me thought, maybe that's what love was, finding someone who needs your stability and giving it to them. What I didn't see at the time was how deep that rabbit hole went. How many upgrades a person could have before you start to wonder if they'll ever be done evolving, or if you're just signing up to be the beta tester forever. But that came later. In the beginning, I was all in. I saw the banana peel stain, the lofty speeches, the patchy resume, and thought, I can work with this. And for a while, I did. The thing about building a life with someone like Travis is that you don't realize you're the one building it until you're too far in to back out cleanly. What started as cute eccentricities slowly turned into a full-time job, and somehow, without even meaning to, I became the project manager of our relationship. For 5 years, I paid the rent. My name was the only one on the lease, because Travis didn't want to be tied down by legal contracts. At the time, I laughed it off. I thought he meant it metaphorically. He didn't. Utilities? Me. Groceries? Me. Every time the fridge broke or the Wi-Fi went down or the vacuum needed replacing, it was my card that got swiped. Travis always had a reason why he couldn't chip in that month. He was between gigs. He was waiting on a freelance payment that never came. He was trying to find something that aligns with his purpose. I used to believe that. I used to repeat those lines to myself like a prayer, like if I just said them enough times, it would all make sense. He changed jobs constantly. Dog walking, bartending, social media consulting, art therapy workshops, even once tried flipping vintage lamps on Etsy. Each new venture came with a new wave of excitement. He'd come home with wild eyes and a vision board, telling me how this was the one, the path that finally felt right. I'd listen, nod, pretend I didn't notice the growing pile of unpaid bills on the counter or the fact that our fridge was mostly condiments and sadness. Meanwhile, he spent his money, what little he actually made, on things that made me feel like I was going insane. New video games he'd play for a week and abandon. Loud patterned clothes that didn't suit him but expressed his vibe. Rounds of drinks for his friends, who called him T, and crashed on our couch more often than I liked. I remember one night, he came home with this neon green beanbag chair he bought for $90. We didn't even have a dining table yet, but he was so proud of it, so convinced it would tie the room together. There were weekends he'd disappear to music festivals or someone's cabin in the woods without telling me, then come back sunburned and broke, claiming he'd had a transformative experience. I stopped asking questions. It wasn't worth the arguments. He always made me feel like I was the one being uptight, too structured, too focused on money and schedules. He'd say things like, "Why do you care so much about rent? It's just a number," like we weren't one late payment away from getting a notice on our door. Sometimes I'd find receipts crumpled in his jeans, $1.48 for a bar tab, $70 for a video game pre-order, $110 for new boots he said were practically a necessity. I once asked him why he didn't put any money toward groceries, and he told me, "I contribute in energy, not in currency." That was his actual sentence. I remember standing there, holding a bag of Trader Joe's produce I paid for, trying to figure out if he was serious or if I was losing my mind. His friends loved him. They thought he was deep, free-spirited, hilarious. And to be fair, he could be all those things. At parties, people would flock to him. He'd hold court in someone's kitchen, telling stories about urban composting in Berlin or how he once hitchhiked through Oregon with only a backpack and a jar of peanut butter. I used to watch him in those moments and wonder how he could be so magnetic out there and so disconnected in here, in the life we were supposed to be sharing. I don't know exactly when it shifted, when I stopped feeling like a partner and started feeling like a caretaker. Maybe it was the third time I maxed out my credit card buying us a new washing machine. Maybe it was when he forgot our anniversary because he was on a digital detox retreat and didn't bring his phone. Or maybe it was quieter than that. A slow erosion, like water on stone, wearing me down one skipped responsibility at a time. He never saw it. Or maybe he did, but it was easier not to look. He'd still call me his anchor and thank me for believing in the process, like I was a saint instead of a woman just trying to keep the lights on. And I let it go on for years. Because I loved him, yes, but also because I didn't know how to stop. Because every time I thought about walking away, I'd picture him crumbling without me, and I didn't want to be the one who broke him. But I was breaking. Slowly, quietly, invisibly. And he never noticed. Or if he did, he didn't say a word. It happened on a Tuesday morning, just after 9 a.m. I was in the back of an Uber, heading to a client meeting downtown, going over notes on my phone when everything turned into chaos. I remember the sickening screech of tires, a split second of silence, and then the impact. The driver had blown through a red light, and we were T-boned by a delivery van. Time folded in on itself after that. I remember being yanked sideways against my seatbelt, the crunch of metal, and the smell of burned rubber. The pain didn't hit right away. Shock is funny like that. It was only after I was being pulled out of the car by paramedics that the panic set in, then the burning in my side, and the cold realization that something inside me wasn't right. I woke up in a hospital room hours later, groggy from the medication, my entire body feeling like it had been beaten with a bat. The nurse told me I had a broken hip, 3 cracked ribs, and a concussion. I couldn't sit up on my own. I couldn't walk. I couldn't even turn my head without waves of nausea. Everything was a blur for the first day or two, a haze of beeping monitors, distant voices, and 4 drips. I remember looking at the clock a lot, waiting for someone to show up. Travis didn't come that first day, or the next. He sent a voice note that first night, said he'd heard about the accident and was processing the shock and would try to come by when he could get centered. I lay there listening to it on repeat, trying to make sense of his words, like there was some hidden meaning I wasn't grasping. The man I lived with, the one I cooked for, supported, and believed in for 5 years, couldn't bring himself to sit by my side. It was Alex who showed up. My best friend since college, the one who always brought snacks on movie nights and knew the exact brand of tea I liked. She didn't ask. She just came. She was there that evening, walking into the room like a burst of light, arms full of things she knew I'd need: dry shampoo, lip balm, socks with grippy bottoms. She kissed my forehead and joked that I looked like I lost a fight with a lawnmower, and I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. When I started crying, she didn't say anything. She just held my hand. She helped me sit up, bit by bit, when the nurses were busy. She brushed my hair out gently, working around the tangles with the kind of patience only someone who truly loves you can muster. She even got one of the nurses to bring in a basin so she could wash my hair right there in the hospital bed. She rolled up her sleeves and used lukewarm water and lavender-scented shampoo from the gift shop, and for a moment, I felt human again. I don't think she slept more than an hour that night. She curled up in the visitor chair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, holding my hand even in her sleep. Travis came the following afternoon. He walked in wearing that oversized hoodie he always wore when he wanted to seem thoughtful, looked around the room like it was offending his senses, and said, "It's kind of stuffy in here." He didn't ask how I was feeling. He sat in the corner, scrolling on his phone between half-hearted questions. At one point, he said he was struggling emotionally with what happened and that he needed time to sit with the trauma of almost losing me. I just stared at him, wondering if he realized I was the one with the broken bones and stitches. He stayed 20 minutes, maybe less. Then he kissed my forehead, told me to let him know when I was more stable, and left. That was it. That was his version of support. Later that evening, as Alex helped me sip broth from a paper cup, she didn't say anything about Travis. She just tucked a pillow behind my back and asked if I wanted her to read to me. I nodded. She pulled out a book from her bag and started reading in a soft, steady voice. And I listened, eyes closed, her words washing over me, the truth starting to settle in my bones deeper than the fractures ever could. It was late, maybe close to midnight, and I couldn't sleep. The hospital room was dim except for the glow from the monitor by my bed and the faint light spilling in from the hallway. My body ached in places I didn't know could hurt, and every breath still felt like sandpaper scraping my ribs. Alex was in the recliner next to me, dozing lightly with her hoodie pulled up, arms crossed over her chest. She'd insisted on staying again, even after I told her she didn't have to. She just said, "I'm not going anywhere," and that was that. She had her phone in her lap, and when it buzzed, she stirred, blinking herself awake. She swiped the screen and went quiet for a long moment. I noticed it, the stillness in her body, the way her eyes stopped moving like she was staring too hard at something. Then she turned the screen toward me without saying a word. It was a photo from Travis's Instagram. He was at a party I didn't know about, smiling with that same lazy, smug grin he wore when he thought he was the cleverest person in the room. His arm was wrapped around Haley, his ex, the one who used to text him late at night and once left her necklace in our bathroom by accident. The caption below the photo hit harder than anything else that week. Finally free of the emotionally draining drama and constant demands. I just stared at it. I read the words over and over, like they might change if I blinked enough times. I hadn't processed anything yet, not the crash, not the hospital, not the fact that I couldn't walk without help, but that I felt all the way down to the marrow. The man I had taken care of, paid for, carried through 5 years of chaos, was at some party holding his ex and telling the world he was finally free from me. I scrolled through the comments, one after another, each one more nauseating than the last. "Good for you, bro. Knew you'd bounce back. You deserve better." Real ones always land on their feet. There were likes, fire emojis, and that fake support people throw around like confetti. Not one person asked where I was. Not one person mentioned I was in a hospital bed with a shattered hip and a concussion while he was out playing the victim. I don't know what hurt more, his betrayal, or the applause he got for it. Alex reached out to take the phone back, like maybe she thought she could spare me from the rest of it, but I shook my head. I needed to see it. I needed to let it sink in that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bad day or a fight we could work through. This was a man who had already written me out of his story, who had replaced the reality of what we had with some warped version where he was the one who suffered. I didn't cry right away. That came later, when Alex helped me shift in bed and the pain flared in my side, and I realized how vulnerable I still was. I'd spent 5 years carrying someone who would never lift a finger for me, and now that I had fallen, he didn't just walk away. He danced on the wreckage and called it freedom. I didn't reply to the post. I didn't comment, didn't text him, didn't send some long message trying to explain how much it hurt. I didn't ask questions or demand answers. I didn't do anything, and that silence felt heavier than any argument we ever had. For 2 full days, I said nothing. I lay in that hospital bed with my body broken and my pride even more so, and I let the stillness work like armor, because the truth was slowly forming in my mind, sharp and undeniable. My name was the only one on the lease. It came back to me in a flash, One of those things you don't think about until it suddenly becomes everything. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table 3 years ago, signing the renewal papers, while Travis made a show of being morally opposed to the idea of signing a document that binds you to a system rooted in capitalist expectations. I rolled my eyes back then, but I signed. I always signed. Every year, it was just my name. The electricity, the internet, the rent, all in my name. He just lived there. Now I had leverage. Not emotional, not petty. Real, legal leverage. And once I saw that clearly, the grief inside me shifted. It didn't disappear, but it sharpened, became something I could hold in my hands. Something I could use. I called my brother first. Liam's a mechanic, not the most emotionally expressive guy, but fiercely loyal. I told him I needed a favor, and before I even explained, he said, "Tell me where and when." Then I called my cousin Rachel, who worked part-time for a moving company and had a van she could borrow. She was immediately in, told me she'd rally a couple of her friends and be ready by the weekend. Finally, I called the landlord. I'd always had a decent relationship with him. Mr. Holbrook, mid-60s, the type who still printed paper receipts. I told him what was happening, gave him the quick version without the drama. I let him know Travis was no longer welcome in the apartment and that I would be changing the locks. Mr. Holbrook didn't hesitate. "As long as the rent's paid and you're the only name on the lease, you do what you need to do," he said. "Just let me know when the new keys are ready." It felt surreal, planning all this while still confined to a hospital bed, my hips screwed together and bruises still blooming across my side. But I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. I had a plan, and I had people. I called it Operation Travis Relocation, half-jokingly, but the truth was it kept me going, gave me a direction. Every detail I coordinated felt like a piece of myself coming back. The day and time were set. Liam would pick me up and drive me there. Rachel and her friends would handle the rest. I wouldn't even have to go inside if I didn't want to. But I would. I needed to see it for myself, to see him gone, to see the space again without the weight of him in it. I didn't tell Travis. I didn't know him that. And if he wanted to play the role of the free man who walked away from the burden of constant demands, he could figure out what freedom really looked like, without a roof, without my fridge, without my bed, and without access to the life I built while he played visionary. The storm was coming. He just didn't know yet that I was the one pulling the clouds together. It all went down on a Sunday afternoon while I was still recovering at Alex's place. Her guest room had become my temporary command center. Pillow fortress, heating pad, half-empty water bottles on the nightstand. And from there, propped up with my laptop and a bottle of prescription painkillers, I coordinated the final phase. Operation Travis Relocation had moved from theory to execution. Liam showed up right on time, as promised, with two of his friends from the garage. They were the kind of guys who didn't ask a lot of questions, just showed up in cargo pants and work gloves, ready to move whatever needed moving. Rachel brought the van. She even brought donuts. I didn't go with them. I didn't need to see it happen in real time. Instead, I waited with my phone on the blanket next to me, occasionally refreshing our group chat where Rachel was sending updates like she was narrating a sports event. The first message was a picture of the front door open, Liam standing there with one hand on his hip, and the other holding Travis's prized gaming headset by the cord like it was some kind of sad, limp animal. Then came the wave. The boxes of collectibles he always said would appreciate in value were tossed unceremoniously into trash bags, those clunky plastic bins lined up along the curb like soldiers awaiting their final orders. His collection of Funko Pops, all those dead-eyed little figurines he had arranged in obsessive rows, were the first to go. Next was the framed poster of a movie he never actually watched but said defined his aesthetic. And then, the crown jewel, the gaming chair. He called it his throne, black and red with built-in speakers and some kind of lumbar support system he used as justification for the $300 he spent on it. Money I later had to make up for when rent came due. Liam dragged it down the stairs like it was a corpse. One of the guys pushed open the dumpster lid while the other helped hoist it in. It didn't even fit all the way, so they took turns stomping on it until it cracked. Rachel sent a photo of that moment, captioned simply, "Long live the king." Nothing was recycled. I made that part clear. It all went in the trash. No compost, no donation, no second life. The man who once declared rotting banana peels sacred and preached about the beauty of decay had his exit scripted perfectly. The king of compost got his symbolic ending. Not as fertilizer, not transformed into something beautiful, but discarded like the rest of the mess he left behind. By the time they were done, the apartment was empty of everything that was his. The Wi-Fi account was canceled. His login on the TV had been wiped. Even his weird handmade vision board, made of string, thumbtacks, and clippings from National Geographic, was ripped off the wall and tossed in the bag with his half-used incense sticks. I didn't keep a single thing. Not the mugs he bought from flea markets. Not the scarves he never wore. Not the Polaroids he insisted on hanging above our bed. I told them to leave it all at the curb. Rachel texted me one last time when they finished. It's done. Looks like a breakup scene in a sitcom. Very dramatic. I smiled for the first time in days. Not a bitter smile, not a spiteful one. Just relief. Later that night, as I lay in Alex's guest bed, sore and exhausted but finally able to breathe without wincing, I thought about how Travis would react when he came home to find his things gone, his throne demolished, and his kingdom reduced to street trash. And for once, I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. He found out later that night. I don't know the exact moment it hit him. Maybe it was when he turned the key in the door and realized it no longer worked. Or maybe it was when he saw the dumpster already half emptied by the garbage truck that had rolled through earlier than usual. Either way, by the time I checked my phone, there were 10 missed calls and 4 voicemails. The first one came in at 9:43 p.m., and it was pure rage. "You can't be serious," he barked into the recording. "You threw my stuff out? Are you insane? You had no right. No right. I live there. I live there." The second message came 2 minutes later. "You owe me everything, Liana. Everything. I gave you 5 years of my life. You don't get to just erase me. I swear to God, if I find out you touched my hard drive." The threats kept escalating. He accused me of being vindictive, unstable, emotionally abusive. He said I was going to regret it, that he could make things very difficult for me if I didn't fix this immediately. Then he switched tactics. The next call was slower, his voice lower, like he was trying to find his footing again. I didn't mean what I said. I was just shocked. "You ambushed me. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. Liana, come on. You're my person. You know that. This was just a bad moment." And then it unraveled even further. The texts started pouring in. I didn't even get to say goodbye to the apartment. I didn't get to pack my clothes. "Why are you doing this to me?" And then, "You're making a mistake. I'm the only one who ever truly understood you." I turned my phone face down and let it buzz. What really pushed him over the edge, though, wasn't the apartment or even the dumpster. It was the job. The part-time position I got him through one of my former colleagues, a flexible marketing assistant role with a local sustainable fashion brand. He'd only had it for a few weeks, barely enough time to screw it up, but it had structure. It had a schedule. He hated that. He used to call it corporate cosplay, even though it was a small startup with less than 10 employees. But now, with nowhere to live and no belongings to cling to, suddenly, it was his lifeline. He found out through an email that his access badge had been deactivated. He must have called the office in a panic, because the same colleague who helped me get him the job texted me later to say, "Your ex just called crying. Is he okay?" I told her she didn't need to worry about him. He was just experiencing consequences. After the threats came the final, desperate pivot, full-blown emotional whiplash. "I miss you," he wrote. "I didn't mean to hurt you. It was all a mistake. I was overwhelmed. I needed space, and I handled it wrong. Please, just talk to me. Please." The messages got longer, more dramatic. "I've been spiraling since the accident. I didn't know how to be there for you. But that doesn't mean I don't care. You're my love. You're my center. I can change." I didn't respond. Not once. He had spent 5 years building himself up in my shadow, using my income, my energy, my network, and my silence. And now, when it all crumbled around him, he realized just how hollow his independence had been. There was nothing left to lean on. No couch to crash on. No refrigerator to raid. No Wi-Fi to stream his distractions. Just a cracked gaming chair in a landfill and a long list of burned bridges. I didn't feel victorious. Just done. Finally, fully, completely done. It started the next morning. I woke up to a string of missed calls from an unknown number that I immediately recognized. Travis's mom, Cheryl. She'd never liked me much, though she played nice when it benefited her. She used to call me sweet but intense, the way someone might describe a chili pepper they didn't expect to bite back. Now she was calling nonstop, 40 times over the course of 2 days, leaving messages that swung between pleading and furious. The first few were your standard maternal outrage, the kind that's less about her son and more about her pride. "Liana, I don't know what's going on between you and Travis, but this is unacceptable. He's devastated. He told me everything. Everything." Then, without pause, "I always knew you were a little dramatic, but I didn't think you'd stoop this low. You've ruined his life over one insensitive post." She said that a lot. One post. As if that post didn't sum up 5 years of being dragged down, ignored, taken for granted. As if hugging his ex and calling me emotionally draining in front of the entire internet was a minor faux pas I was supposed to overlook. The voicemails got more aggressive from there. She accused me of being vindictive, unstable, even cruel. She said Travis had nowhere to go, no job, no things. "You've stripped him of everything." Then came the threats. "We're speaking to an attorney. she said in one message. Destruction of property, illegal eviction, harassment. You should be ashamed. I didn't respond to any of it at first. I let the messages pile up until they blurred into white noise. But by the end of day 2, I'd had enough. I didn't call her back. I sent her an email. Short, calm, and attached with a carefully curated bundle of PDFs. I labeled everything clearly. Utility bills with my name. The lease agreement with only my signature. Screenshots of texts where I asked Travis to contribute, and he ghosted me or made excuses. The email from the landlord confirming I had the right to remove him. And most importantly, a notice of non-payment I received just last month after Travis spent our grocery money on concert tickets and then blamed the electric company for billing cycles being designed to oppress the poor. I ended it with a single line. If you'd like to pursue legal action, I suggest you forward this information to your lawyer. She never replied. The call stopped that evening. I don't know what she expected. Maybe she thought I'd apologize, beg for forgiveness, undo everything out of guilt. But I had receipts, literal and metaphorical, and no interest in pretending that 5 years of emotional labor could be reduced to one post. Cheryl always said I was too intense. She just never imagined what would happen when all that intensity stopped being used to hold her son's life together. I didn't expect her to call again after I sent the email. But 2 days later, Cheryl reached out. Not screaming, not sobbing, just quiet. She left one voicemail, short and hesitant. Liana, I think we need to talk. I want to understand. Against every instinct I had, I agreed. We met at a neutral spot, a cafe near Alex's place, and I brought a folder with me. Not to be dramatic, just to be prepared. I'd spent years carrying the weight of Travis's mess in silence. And now that someone wanted the truth, I wasn't going to fumble it. She looked tired when she arrived. Worn down, like someone who'd been hit with a reality check and was still trying to piece it together. We sat at a table in the back, and after a few minutes of awkward small talk, I opened the folder and started laying it out. The credit card statements were first. Over $139,000 in total debt, spread across 5 cards, most of which were in my name. I slid them toward her, page by page, highlighting the charges he made without asking. Designer sneakers, VR headsets, drone accessories, tickets to festivals I never attended, and countless food delivery charges at times I wasn't even home. She kept looking from the papers to me and back again, her face tightening with every line she read. I told her how I covered rent on my own every single month. How Travis only ever pitched in when his parents sent him money, which he always framed as his income. I explained that the groceries, the utilities, the car maintenance, even the subscriptions to streaming services, every bit of it came out of my paycheck. And then I told her about the ring. It was my grandmother's, a sapphire set in gold, passed down to me when I turned 25. I used to wear it every day, until I stopped, not wanting to risk damaging it while cleaning or working. I kept it in a small velvet box in the top drawer of my nightstand. One day, during one of Travis's so-called financial emergencies, I came home to find the box empty. He told me he had pawned it to cover an investment opportunity. That opportunity turned out to be a bulk order of novelty t-shirts he planned to resell on Etsy, which he abandoned after 2 weeks. The ring was gone. Forever. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. Really listened. When I finished, she looked completely hollowed out. She started talking then, mostly to herself, in this stunned, broken whisper. He told me you were unemployed, that he was supporting the both of you, that you were living off him. She looked up at me, her voice cracking. He said you didn't want to work, that he was doing everything. I didn't respond right away. There wasn't anything to say. She already knew. He always made himself sound like the martyr, she went on. Said he was exhausted from carrying the weight of the household. That he was building something while you. I don't even know what I thought anymore. That was the thing about Travis. He lied with ease. Not in dramatic, obvious ways, but slowly, consistently, like dripping water. He told people what they wanted to hear, his friends, his family, sometimes even me. He was a shapeshifter, always performing, always the misunderstood genius or the overburdened visionary. Cheryl didn't defend him after that. She didn't excuse his behavior. She just sat there, her hands clenched on the table, looking like a woman who had just been introduced to her son for the first time. When she finally stood up to leave, she paused, as if debating whether to say anything else. Then she looked at me and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have asked sooner." I didn't need her apology. I hadn't been waiting for it. But I accepted it, because I could see in her face that this wasn't a show. It was recognition. The mask had finally fallen off, and what was left behind wasn't something she could pretend not to see. Once Cheryl knew the truth, I realized there was no reason to keep the rest of it in the dark. The stories Travis had spun over the years weren't just aimed at her. He'd been building a false version of himself for everyone, his friends, his extended family, even the people he worked with. They all saw him as this charismatic guy who was just a little misunderstood, a little unlucky. A guy with big ideas who just needed space and support. No one ever asked who was actually paying for that space, who was footing the bill while he chased his next dream. So I made a folder. Not to be petty, not to be cruel, but because I was done cleaning up after him while he waltzed into people's lives with his curated sob story and left them to deal with the aftermath. Inside were scanned copies of unpaid bills, rent notices, messages where he promised to cover it next time, and never did. I included the screenshots of his post with Haley, the comments, the timeline of events next to the hospital discharge papers with my name on them. I organized everything by date. It read like a slow collapse disguised as a partnership. Then I sent it out. First to the people I knew had already taken him in, his friends, the ones who posted fire emojis and "you deserve better, bro" under that photo. I wrote one sentence above the attachments. If this is who you're opening your couch to, I thought you should know what's coming with him. I didn't wait for replies. I wasn't looking for validation. I just wanted the truth to catch up with him for once. Then I sent it to his future employer. It wasn't hard to find the contact info. He'd been bragging about the opportunity for weeks. Some eco-startup he claimed had aligned values and got his vision. He had applied for a communications role, the irony of which wasn't lost on me. I attached the same materials. I added a note explaining that while I didn't intend to sabotage anyone's career, I believed they had a right to know who they were hiring. I included the screenshots of his public post insulting me while I was hospitalized, and a record of the missed rent payments on a place he claimed to be maintaining. 3 days later, the offer was rescinded. They sent a short email thanking him for his interest and stating they were going in another direction. Word got around fast after that. The same people who once joked about how deep he was started pulling away. I didn't hear anything directly from him after the job fell through, but a mutual acquaintance told me he moved out of state a week later, crashing with a cousin who owed him one. I never asked where. It didn't matter. Wherever he went, he'd have to do it without me smoothing the way. For once, Travis had to carry his own baggage. And now, everyone could finally see just how heavy it really was. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon, delivered in one of those insulated containers normally used for meal kits or medication. There was no return address, just my name and apartment number written in uneven black marker. Alex had stepped out to run errands, so I opened it alone, sitting on the edge of her couch with a bottle of iced tea in one hand and absolutely no idea what kind of chaos I was about to unpack. The smell hit me first. It wasn't unbearable, but it was distinct, the kind of musty, sour odor that tells you something inside is decaying. I peeled back the plastic lid and immediately recoiled. Inside the box was a layer of wet, half-rotted food scraps. Eggshells, wilted greens, orange peels, coffee grounds, and actual worms, writhing slowly through the mess like a bad joke. And buried near the center, like some kind of twisted treasure, was a small black box. Jewelry-sized. For a moment, I just stared at it. My brain couldn't catch up with what I was seeing. Then I noticed the folded note taped to the inside of the lid. On it, written in smudged ink that had absorbed the moisture from the compost, were the words, "Like compost, our love can be reborn. Let this be our soil." It was signed with a heart and his name. I didn't touch the box with my bare hands. I used a fork from the kitchen drawer to fish it out, and even then, I had to set it on a plate like some strange, contaminated relic. I opened it slowly, already numb to whatever nonsense waited inside. It was a ring, a silver band, nothing flashy, with a tiny embedded stone. At first, I didn't recognize it. It wasn't mine. It certainly wasn't my grandmother's. I turned it over, and that's when I saw the engraving. A date, one I didn't recognize immediately, until I remembered the post. The party, the photo of him with his arm around Haley. It was her birthday. He had sent me the ring he bought for his ex, packaged it in literal garbage, and called it a romantic gesture. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just sat there in silence for a long time, staring at the ring on the plate surrounded by compost residue, trying to imagine what kind of person thought this was love. Not just the symbolism, the rotting waste, the worms, but the laziness of it. Recycling a gift meant for someone else and passing it off as meaningful, as if I was too desperate or too sentimental to notice. I threw the whole thing in the trash. Not the compost bin. The trash. The irony was not lost on me. I washed my hands 3 times, then sent Alex a photo of the box and the note with the caption, "He's still trying." She replied instantly, "With a biological hazard?" That was the last gift he ever sent me. A week-old metaphor and a second-hand ring buried in the filth he used to worship. A perfect goodbye. The last unraveling started quietly, like a frayed thread finally giving way after too much tension. Word got back to me through Rachel that Travis had been kicked out of his friend Damien's apartment. Apparently, the couch surfing turned into week-long gaming sessions, disappearing food, and a series of borrowed items that were never returned. When Damien finally confronted him, Travis called him a sellout and stormed out, leaving behind a half-eaten rotisserie chicken and a broken Bluetooth speaker. After that, it was a slow collapse. His cousin in Denver refused to take him in once she saw the folder I had sent to the family. Even his younger sister, who used to idolize him, stopped answering his texts. His fallback list got shorter and shorter, until all that was left was me. He showed up at Alex's place on a Tuesday night, unannounced, pounding on the door just after 10. I was on the couch, half asleep, my hip still stiff and sore, when I heard the banging. At first I thought it was a delivery or someone in the building, but then I heard his voice. He wasn't yelling, not yet. He was talking fast, almost chanting. "Liana, please. I just need to talk. Please. I don't have anywhere else to go." Alex went to the door, opened it just enough to confirm what I already knew, then slammed it shut before he could wedge his foot inside. That's when the tantrum began. He started shouting, pacing back and forth in front of the door, blaming me for everything. "You ruined me," he shouted. "You made me this way. You let me fall." He punched the siding next to the door, not hard enough to break anything, but enough to shake something loose in me. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my phone and called the police. I told the dispatcher calmly that there was an uninvited man outside, yelling, making threats, and that I had reason to believe he wouldn't leave unless someone made him. By the time the squad car arrived, he had slumped onto the sidewalk, head in his hands, mumbling about how he had nothing left, and maybe it would be better if he just disappeared forever. The officers talked to him for a while. They didn't arrest him. They didn't need to. They were patient, professional, but firm. One of them walked over to me while the other kept an eye on him and asked if I had reason to believe he was a danger to himself. I told the truth. No. He says that when he wants attention. He's done it before. It's never about ending his life. It's about controlling someone else's. The officer nodded. That's what we figured. It sounded rehearsed. They gave him the choice to leave voluntarily or be taken in for a mental health hold. He chose to leave. I watched from the window as he walked down the street to his car, a rusted-out Civic that barely ran, and got in without looking back. He spent the night there, according to a neighbor who saw him curled up in the driver's seat with the seat reclined all the way back and a hoodie over his face. That was the end of it. He didn't come back after that. No more deliveries. No more voicemails or desperate emails. Just silence. The exile was complete. Not by some act of vengeance, not by force. Just by finally refusing to hold up the structure he built on my back. Once I stepped away, it all collapsed. And I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. A month after it all ended, I signed the lease on a small one-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city. Nothing fancy, second-floor walk-up, creaky floors, windows that rattle in the wind, but it was mine. The first time I turned the key and stepped inside, the silence felt like a clean slate. I didn't think about Travis. I didn't think about what he would say about the lighting or the lack of atmosphere. I just stood there with a set of keys in my hand and a whole life ahead of me. I bought a car. A used 2007 Honda Civic with a dented bumper and a stubborn trunk latch. It wasn't glamorous, but it ran, and I didn't have to ask anyone's permission to drive it. For the first time in years, I wasn't coordinating around someone else's chaos. I wasn't making room for someone who couldn't carry themselves. I spent a Saturday afternoon at the plant nursery down the street and came home with 3 new pots and 2 bags of soil. No metaphors. No long-winded speeches about rebirth or microbial cycles. Just dirt, water, and sunlight. I planted ivy in the kitchen window, a snake plant by the front door, and basil in a chipped ceramic pot near the stove. I didn't try to name them or assign meaning. I just watered them when they were dry and let them grow. A week after I moved in, I got a knock at the door. It was Cheryl. She stood there with a manila envelope in her hands and a look I hadn't seen before. No scolding, no performance. Just something like quiet regret. She handed me the envelope and said, "This is from me." Not him. Inside was a check for $2,000. She called it compensation. I didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it. But I took it. Not because it fixed anything, but because it marked something. An ending. An acknowledgement. A closing of a chapter that had stretched on far too long. I used some of it to buy new bedsheets and a proper desk chair. I used the rest to pay off the last of the interest on one of the credit cards he had filled in my name. And that was it. I don't think about him much anymore. Sometimes I'll catch a whiff of that earthy compost smell from the community garden down the street, and it makes me pause, but not in a bad way. It just reminds me of where I've been, how far I've come. I don't compost anyone else's mess anymore. Now, I'm the gardener of my own life.